Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining the session. My name is Tiberio Radu. I am a senior program manager on the Azure Stack team, and I'm joined today by
Kirtana Venkatraman, and I'm a PM on the Azure Stack compute team.
Today we have a pretty packed agenda, the most slides we've ever made. We have more than the Azure Stack session before by 2, so we hope to get it in time for the 45 minutes allocated. We're going to go quickly through the IaaS improvements, the migration processes, and the tools and the modern ops which are enabled by these. There are a number of assumptions we are going to make that everybody knows what Azure Stack is. Everybody knows what all these bullets in the slide are. If you don't, it's not a big issue. You will be able to go at the links that we're going to use and learn more about Azure Stack all up. We are going to use we are using QR codes across all the slides, and you'll be able to take a snap at them and follow the links. Assuming this works, this slide we sort of reused from the Azure Migrate team. If you've already seen the Azure Migrate sessions throughout the week, which happened so far and are planned throughout the week, you should learn more about the Azure Migrate pieces towards Azure. But you also need to look at, you can also look at this as an Azure Stack functionality as well, because Azure Stack should be viewed as an enabler to Azure. So all the triggers that are used to migrate to Azure, in most cases, you can use the same motivation for migrations to Azure Stack as well. Not all the bullets on this slide are they're a good fit for Azure Stack. Things like capacity needs, you won't be able to scale as much on Azure Stack as you can on Azure, obviously. Azure Stack starts with 4 nodes, goes to 16, is not a hyperscale solution by any means. But it doesn't mean you cannot start with what you already have. It doesn't mean you cannot focus on the operational efficiency and start to build up from there. This means you can start with a simple lift and shift. You can move your applications as they are on Azure Stack, and you can take advantage of the operational innovation which happens in there. This is enabled by IaaS, and we're going to talk about what that actually lights up and how you can use it. There is a big difference between IaaS and virtualization, and you need to have a very crisp understanding on what these are and how they are used. Virtualization would mean something like Azure Stack HCI, while IaaS is only found on Azure and Azure Stack from this perspective, right? So when you focus on operational efficiency, you will start with what you have. You will improve that with the IaaS benefits, which we'll talk in a bit, and then you can start building on top. We also have one customer that will have a customer story towards the end, where they talk about how they use these processes to actually get started and go to production with what they have and then start improving it, right? The other path you can follow is to have a sort of a redesign of your application from the beginning. So if your applications are containerized, or you can move them, simply lift and shift them into Azure Stack or Azure, you should definitely go that route. The point to make is that regardless of the path you're taking, you are essentially looking at migration, enablement, and innovation. The migration piece, we're going to talk about the third-party solutions which enable this today. For enablement, we have a few announcements which are products and services coming to Azure Stack in order to light up more of these scenarios on Azure Stack. And then the innovation piece are either refactoring or re-architecting your applications, rebuilding them, and making them more cloudy, right? Towards this, we have a number of hybrid patterns that we launched, which help you sort of have a good understanding on how that fits in and how you should build those applications to be cloud aware. But you can start today, like I've said, and you can use IaaS for this. And flipping over to the benefits of IaaS.
All right. So as Tibi mentioned, it's really important to have a very crisp understanding of the difference between IaaS and virtualization. So what I really want to say is Azure Stack, at its core, is an IaaS platform. Of course, we have a lot of PaaS services available as well, but at its core, it is an IaaS platform. So it not only has basic IaaS features like creating virtual machines, but it also brings a lot of the features from Azure. So whether it is being able to share your virtual machines to the right set of people using RBAC, or whether it's able to use resource groups to organize your virtual machines into a particular group, or whether it is using the self-service model, either for support or for your own customers or yourselves to create your own virtual networks and create your own storage, or whether it is using something like virtual machine scale sets that come from Azure. And that really will help you with your VM scale and VM availability. So that's really kind of important to understand as to what you actually get after moving to Azure Stack. So what are the benefits of IaaS here? And then the one thing that I want to point out is we've announced an Azure Stack IaaS blog series. So that's available on that QR code. So do have a quick look. That gives you a good idea into how to really use IaaS on Azure Stack and really what to look for and what IaaS on Azure Stack gives you. So these are some, just a second. Yep. So these are some of the IaaS features that you do get on Azure Stack. We'll actually look at some of these a little more in depth a little later today in this session, but just to give you a quick look of that. So we've given you, a quick look at what IaaS is and what you get with IaaS on Azure Stack. But I think one thing that's really, really important to talk about is migration processes. So how do you really think of a migration, and how do you be successful when you're trying to migrate to Azure Stack? So I think the most important thing to think about when you have a migration is to understand what you have, what you really want to achieve, and then how to get there. So the first thing in terms of what you have is, let's try to have a look at what your current architecture looks like on-prem. So how many physical servers are you using? How many virtual machines are there? What are those VM sizes looking like? Do you have any platform management tools that you're using today? So maybe you have your own portals to manage these virtual machines. Maybe you have certain monitoring tools that you're using today, like SCOM. So it's very important to understand from a wholesome view as to what you exactly have today, and then plan for all of those components when you do migrate. When you talk about migration, there's a certain set of things that you need to look at, which will help you decide whether or not you need to migrate to Azure Stack or whether you need to migrate to Azure Public Cloud. And a lot of those are cost. So how much money do you really have to play with? And then connectivity. So are you running in an oil rig where you don't actually have connectivity to the internet? So what do you do in those cases? And then regulatory and data gravity requirements. So are you comfortable with moving all of your data to the public cloud, or do you need the cloud capabilities, but you're not ready for that yet? And then, of course, high availability requirements. So like node level fault tolerance, region level fault tolerance, really what are you looking at there? And that will really frame where you migrate to. So an example is if you do have data gravity requirements or regulatory requirements, you might want to have an Azure Stack in your own data center. If you have connectivity requirements, maybe you're on a cruise ship and you can't actually connect to the internet at all times. Maybe an Azure Stack makes complete sense for you. So that's really important to think through. A successful migration journey, as I mentioned, is a place where you actually know what you want and how you're actually going to get to it. And the how can be achieved by some of the migration guidance we have.
Based on the projects we've seen and the lessons learned we've had so far, we created a number of documents which are going to help you to build a migration muscle, as well as give you the information required to understand what Azure Stack is and how to actually use it. So it's not only important to understand what the process is and what you already have, but also where you're going and what the limitations are towards where you're going, right? Towards this, we have a set of documents which are around building a migration practice as a pattern, so to say, end-to-end pattern towards building a migration practice. This is structured in a format where you have a design and envisioning phase, and then the actual implementation all the way to the decommissioning. Each of these chapters are structured in a manner that help you build a set of discussion topics, a set of questions you need answers, a set of outcomes you need to take out of that chapter, as well as links and pointers to learning more about that specific topic. The other piece on this self-driven migration guidance, right? So everything I'm describing now is self-driven, something you are doing by yourselves inside your companies. The second part is on the Azure Stack Foundation. This is a set of documents in the EAI program, the Early Adopter Initiative, which happened a year and a half, 2 years ago. This was driven by MCS, Microsoft Consulting Services, and together with the engineering team, they've built a series of 12 modules going through each of the components of Azure Stack, now Azure Stack Hub, and describing them very detailed, with very detailed information, as well as give you insights into what's happening behind that. The slides for this are going to be made available very soon, so that AKMS link is not available today. It will be by probably next week. But today, we have the videos which will go with all these slides, meaning every one of these slides will have a sort of a talk track done by one of the consultants that helped build those patterns, and it helps you understand what's the thought behind those slides. The next piece of guidance, self-driven guidance, is in the Microsoft Cloud Workshop. The MCW is a set of how-tos and step-by-step guides, workshops that help you have a better understanding on what an Azure Stack operator actually means. We already had an operator guide for the app services, and we are extending this today with an operational guide, meaning things you can do as an Azure Stack operator and things you should know about the platform before you actually move into it, right? Now, all of these are available on GitHub. You'll be able to add to them, so as you learn, you can do a PR to them and improve them. But the other piece is on the blogs and videos. There's a series of blog series that talk about migration, and there's also Thomas Maurer, who is one of our cloud advocates, built a series of videos which talk about migration from a workload perspective. These workloads have a specific migration path, meaning you wouldn't just lift and shift a domain controller, right? You would use internal DC mechanisms to actually replicate that. Maybe you wouldn't use a lift and shift for a file server. You would use the server migration services to actually move those. And for SQL, there are a number of guidances which are available for Azure. And as you will see in the documents, they start with a note that if for whatever reason, is that maybe regulatory or security or compliance or whatever it is, if you cannot go to Azure, you can follow the same guidance for Azure Stack, because literally the same process, having ARM behind it, you would end up on with the same experience. Now, all of these are self-driven. What if you are more on you're looking for somebody with experience to help you, guide you through that migration process and to help you be successful towards that migration? For this, we have two options for you. There's a service provider approach, and we have, this week, there's a new SI program being announced where all of these service providers are certified for various workloads. One of these workloads is the migration and BCDR, meaning you'll be able to reach out to one of these validated service providers that can provide this service to you, right? And the other piece would be through using something like Microsoft Enterprise Services. There's a consulting services arm, and then there's a Premier arm. Under Premier, they are launching, well, they've launched last week a new offering around migrating your workloads. There's like a 3-day workshop that will help you accelerate that migration and move the workloads. All of these are things you will learn, things you need to know before actually doing the migration. But what about the tools required to help you migrate? At the beginning of the year, we've announced a number of third-party partners that help with the migration path itself. Today, we are extending that with a number of announcements. The first one is Veeam. Veeam has a solution which is available in the marketplace. You can use this directly from the Azure Stack Marketplace, download it, and just use it. Most of these partners have a tiered approach, meaning you have a trial version which runs for whatever number of days, 30, 60 days, and then you need to buy the license. If you are confident on your skills, if you are confident on your migration process, then you can use this by yourselves without any support from either the third party or from Microsoft. If you're okay with that, you should totally start that process. If not, you can engage the third-party partner, or you can engage one of the SIs to actually help you drive that migration. The next one is Veritas, and Vijay discussed about this in the previous session. Cohesity is another partner that just announced Azure Stack as a target. They are also in the booths in the hub, and you can talk with them. Carbonite is one of our initial partners as well. They are present and they have a good experience migrating workloads. They have a 30-day trial that you can use, and they are open to helping you drive those migrations. The next one of our initial partners is Commvault. Commvault is present in the marketplace. You can download it and just use it. I'm skipping through these because each of them have good things and things which are not so great about that tool. You will need to understand the tool. You will need to work with that partner to understand what it can provide to you, and then build on top of that. One of these examples is Cloudbase. Cloudbase has a solution which actually integrates with Azure Migrate. It pulls the assessment from Azure Migrate, and it feeds that into their migration tool. So then you use Azure Migrate to do the assessment. You understand what your environment looks like. That's fed into their tool called Coriolis. And the tool will actually recreate the Azure Stack environment and then migrate the resources. Corent is another one of the partners that was with us from the beginning and has a number of customers that are already migrated. And in terms of tools, especially when you're talking about migrating applications which are not HA or DR aware, Zero Down is a very interesting product which sits in front of your application and provides a fault-tolerant solution across multiple stamps. So you have your application running on 2 stamps, for example. You put Zero Down in front of it, and now you have a end-to-end fault-tolerant HA solution. In the context of end of support, so as probably I should have mentioned this at the beginning, but one of the main drivers of the migrations is the need to refresh or renew or move your workloads, existing workloads, which in most cases are Windows Server 08 servers. Windows Server 08 and 08 R2 are scheduled for end of support in January. SQL Server 08 is already in the end of extended security update period starting last July. This means once you've reached that point, you won't get any updates for Windows Server and SQL 08 unless you buy an extended custom support agreement. Or if you move those workloads to Azure and Azure Stack, you will get 3 years of extended support. So free extended support, yes. Now, when you're moving SQL workloads, for example, on Azure Stack, one of the things which happens is you're going to lose the ability to have a shared storage across your servers, meaning you won't be able to have a failover cluster on those workloads. CEOS is one of the partners that enables this and makes it so that the servers will see a disk. I mean, they will see different disks, but it will ask as if it's a shared disk. And now you can create a failover clustering solution on top of it. If you need more information on this, that's the link for the CEOs. Now, all of these are things that are coming from the partner side and are helping accelerate that adoption. We are also building and enabling things from the Azure Stack side to help you drive that.
Yeah. So in terms of enablement, I think there's a lot of good things we've been announcing over the week and continue to announce. So in terms of Azure Stack Hub Compute, we've also enabled a couple of things, and I'd love to share these with you. So this has pretty much been an ask from a lot of people, and I'm really, really happy to announce that we will now be supporting Cloud Init-based Linux VM deployments on Azure Stack from the upcoming update. So what it really is, I mean, I think a scenario where you'd really care about it is many organizations today have a multiple cloud presence or even an on-premise presence. And sometimes you need to configure a set of applications across both. So you need something to look very similar to the other thing that you've already created or customized. And how do you make sure that that customization is very easy to do and can be replicated across multiple environments? And that's really where Cloud Init comes up. So take a case where you have a Linux VM and you've customized it to run a web server. So I have a demo on this. And you'd like to set this up not only in Azure, where maybe you have your prod environment, but also you kind of want to set it up on Azure Stack, where you have like your pre-prod environment, for example. And that's really where you can leverage Cloud Init. So Cloud Init, as you know, is like a very, very widely used approach to customize a Linux VM as it boots for the very first time. So what you can do is you can set up kind of a lot of things. You can set up a certain set of packages that you wanted to install. You can set up like literally all the configuration that you need to run. You can run a specific set of commands. You can configure SSH keys. You can send certificates into the VM. So there's a lot of things that you can already set up on the Linux VM just as it boots. So as soon as it comes up, it looks great, and you're ready to use it. So moving to the demo, just a second. So the good part of Cloud Init is it also works across distributions. So whether you're using Red Hat or Ubuntu or whatever you decide to use, all you have to tell Cloud Init is the set of packages that it needs to install. So it's not like you have to say apt-get or yum based on the different distro. You just have to tell it the set of packages that need to be installed. And then you put in your app configuration. This particular web server that I'm trying to create will say, hello world from a particular host name. So it's very basic. And then also you can tell it a specific set of commands that you want it to run at initialization. So given this, what I've done is this is basically what is called a cloud config file. So anything that you need to customize is done using that cloud config file. What I've done is I've thrown this cloud config file into a storage account on Azure. So that's about here. And then I take this, and then I put it into my Linux VM creation PowerShell script. So this is something that many of you have probably used before. It's just a standard VM creation script. What I've done is I've made sure to open up port 80 because it's going to be a web server and I wanted to accept HTTP traffic. And then I've also made sure to add that specific cloud config file right about here. And it's done with the help of a custom data flag. So what this basically tells Cloud Init to do is it says, well, I've actually given you all that customization in that cloud config file. Can you go read through it, download it, and process it, and make sure to set up my Linux VM for me? So that's what this does. So after running this, I've already created a VM. So I'll show you one that I've already created. So this is my Cloud Init VM. And what is it supposed to do? I'm basically supposed to be able to reach that IP, and it's supposed to say hello world, right? So I have that set up. And here it is. Basically, I hit that IP address, and then it says hello world from the Cloud Init computer. So it's super, super simple, and you can use that same Cloud Init file to replicate things across Azure Stack, across other clouds. So it makes that migration path really easy for you if you're already on maybe a different cloud and you just want to move some Linux VMs to Azure Stack. right. The one piece of advice that I want to give you is Cloud Init cannot be used for extension provisioning. So you can only use it to pretty much set things up in the very beginning. So you need the Linux agent if you need extension provisioning. So that's something to really keep in mind for people who've been using Azure Stack for a while and have been using VM extensions for a while. The second thing that I want to announce is instance metadata service on Azure Stack. I'm glad some of you are really, really happy about this. So this has been pretty much like a very large ask from a lot of customers. And the reason really is, after you move your set of VMs to Azure Stack, it's really important to think about modernizing this. And so if you have applications running on these VMs, or they might need to know where they are. They might need to know more information about themselves. And how do you really get that? You get that through instance metadata service. So what instance metadata service is it's an HTTP endpoint, and it provides information about the running virtual machine instance. So it can pretty much tell you a lot of things, and I'll show you a quick demo on that. But it is queried through a very well-known non-routable IP address, which is 169.254.169.254. So we will support all IMDS API versions in an upcoming release. And at this point, we're only planning to support the instance/compute portion of it. If you need the /instance/network portion, do leave a feature on Azure Stack user voice. We'd really like to get an idea of how many people use that. So that would be really awesome if you could do that. So let me show you a quick demo. This is super, super preview. No one's seen it except for you guys. Is it showing up? Yeah. All right. No. OK. So this is a Bitnami Hadoop VM that I've created. It's basically one of the offerings that we have in our marketplace. And maybe I want to do something such that I query, the VM kind of queries itself and knows where it is. So just generally, when I query that HTTP endpoint, I get a lot of good information. So of course, I get the OS type of the VM. I get the environment of the VM. So now I actually know this VM is running on Azure Stack. I might want to set up different things based on where the VM is running. It could run on Azure, and I wanted to configure it, and the application needs to configure itself in a particular way. And maybe if it's running on Azure Stack, it needs to configure itself in a different way. So this is a great way to know about that. It tells you the VM size. As time progresses, we'll also put some storage profile information. As I said, this is super, super preview. But when it goes GA, we should have all of this information. In the last demo, I also showed you custom data. So say you decided to configure your VM using Cloud Init. Whatever you put in that cloud config file will appear in custom data. So it'll say, hey, this is exactly where I got that cloud config file from. You can also see the publisher. You can see the location. You can see the resource group name, subscription ID. So this is some of the basic information that you get from within the VM. So an application within the VM can query for all of this information and do things on its own. All right. So that's some exciting thing about instance metadata service. It should be available in a future release. So looking forward to all of you trying it. And then the last announcement from my side, which is some of the more exciting stuff, is with respect to GPU preview. So whether it's learning, AI, or entry-level desktops, and if GPUs are used as whole or partitioned, it's been a very, very large requirement, especially in these scenarios. So we're looking to support the NCV3 series, so that's the NVIDIA V100s, the AMD MI25s, which is the NVV4 series that's on Azure, and to be determined NVIDIA T4 SKU. So this is slated to be available January 2020. If you are interested in trying the GPU preview, please sign up on that AKMS link. If you have customers, if you're interested, we'd love to hear from you.
Now, one of the things which was requested from the very early days was around WVD. WVD is Windows Virtual Desktop, which has GA'd on Azure a couple of weeks ago. And today we are announcing the private preview of WVD on Azure Stack. This will be a connected-only scenario, meaning that the host pools will run on Azure Stack, the workloads themselves will be on Azure Stack, while the control plane will be in Azure. So you will need to have that connectivity there. It won't work in a disconnected scenario yet. This will enable modernization scenarios where you have workloads which need to stay close to your on-premises services, right? The same network requirements and considerations apply for Azure as well as for Azure Stack. The one thing to add here is that from an Azure Stack perspective, you will need that connectivity to Azure in order to have WVD. The way it will work at the beginning is that the connection will be made. So even if you're in the same network as your Azure Stack host, you will go to Azure to authorize it, and then you will connect to your host pools. We are very excited about the scenarios which are enabled by this, and there's a preview form. There's a preview form you can use to sign up for the preview, and please do sign up for the preview. Now, throughout the week, you've heard about AKS, about Arc, and the new scenarios enabled by Arc. AKS engine has GA'd at Ignite, has GA'd on Azure Stack. Now, AKS engine helps you create those clusters on one Azure Stack, right? But how do you monitor and how do you actually see what's going on with your Kubernetes? So we have, where am I? We have, yeah, we talked about these. So we have a way for you to connect those clusters to Azure Monitor and then highlight those clusters in Azure Monitor for you to monitor across all your deployments. So imagine if you have multiple Azure stacks, you can deploy the same configuration across all your clusters, so all your AKS instances running on those clusters, and then link those up to Azure and highlight the information in Azure Monitor. You can also do this using Arc. So you can plug in the AKS clusters themselves into Arc and then monitor the entire flow from Arc. This will enable scenarios where you just create the cluster on Azure Stack, it pulls down the policies, it configures itself, and then starts reporting to Azure Monitor. And for this, we have a quick demo where we have this is an Azure Stack portal where we have configured a cluster, an AKS cluster. There's a number of agents already running, and this is called US cluster, US West cluster. It's already linked into an Arc, I don't know what the name for this is, Arc management for AKS, AKS Arc management. And it's reporting as resources on the Arc side, right? So this is the cluster running on Azure Stack, exposing those, projecting those clusters on Azure. From here, it's monitored in Azure, it's monitored through Azure Monitor. And you can see here the environment will show up in the preview. So if you're using Arc, it's going to show up as Azure. If you're using the configuration of AKS engine directly, it's going to show up as an Azure Stack environment, and you'll be able to actually see those clusters, nodes. You'll be able to collect all the data from them, and then, assuming you have a portal which refreshes, you would see all the information in one place.
All right. So I think one thing that we've always emphasized on is modernization and using Azure Stack Hub as an IaaS platform. So with all of the things that you've seen in terms of the things that we're enabling for the Azure Stack Hub IaaS platform, I think it only feeds in deeper into the IaaS story. I think a lot of customers come up to us and they say, hey, we want this PaaS service and that PaaS service. But it's really important to understand that there's so many things that you can do with IaaS itself. So we've had a very rich marketplace since the very beginning and are only extending it. And with that come a lot of good offers. For example, there's a ton of Bitnami offers. There's Hadoop. There's Cassandra. There's a lot of things that you can set up with just the marketplace. And you don't really need to go all the way up to PaaS. And we've generally also had a great pay-per-use story. So customers only pay for the VMs that they use, and they don't have to pay for everything since the very beginning. So generally, I think IaaS is awesome on Azure Stack. And I think with some of the announcements that we've made with respect to Cloud Init, it only feeds deeper into some guest management stories. So whether it is using Cloud Init to run custom code within the VM and set things up, or it is previously using VM extensions to do something very similar based on the VM extension. Or if it is the consistency story with Azure, where you can do the exact same things on Azure and Azure Stack with ARM templates. Whatever it is, IaaS on Azure Stack is really, really useful. And I think the thing to highlight really is Azure Stack, again, Azure Stack Hub, is an extension of Azure. So having the power of ARM has always helped ease the modernization. So that's something that you should really keep in mind as you're going through this session. So with all of the IaaS things in mind, something that we want to announce is new IaaS-only patterns. So we have a set of IaaS-only patterns that we've announced. So there is something as basic as how do you think about setting a Windows VM to something much more complicated, like setting up multi-region or multiple Azure Stack or SQL HA across multiple Azure Stacks, which is a little more complicated. So there's a couple of patterns that we've put out there. Do have a look. And we're really hoping this should help some of you customers get started on Azure Stack with some of these patterns in mind. So these are some example pictures of some patterns that we've set up. The one on top is like highly available SQL. So as you know, we're trying to obtain parity with Azure, but then there's some features that we don't have. So it actually goes through, well, what do you actually use in terms of an application gateway when there is no application gateway on Azure Stack? So it gives you a lot of a good idea on how to set things up in Azure Stack. So we also have some foundational patterns available, and so that's the below the aka.ms link below the first one. So that should also help you think about VNet peering and things like that on Azure Stack that are always questions for us. What we're looking to have is some great stories. So we know that a lot of our customers are using IaaS today, and we'd really like to hear from you on some IaaS success stories that you've had on Azure Stack, whether you are an Azure Stack customer today, or if you are a customer who's thinking of migrating to Azure Stack and has an IaaS only workload. So if you are one such customer and you would like to share your story with us, do sign up on that aka.ms survey link. We love to hear from you, and we have a lot to learn from all of you.
From an infrastructure as code perspective, when you move your when you have workloads on Azure Stack, they are all taking into account things like ARM and things like using ARM templates to deploy them and such. But it's not necessarily true that every time you deploy a resource, you use an ARM template to deploy it, right? You usually will go, you will do it in an ad hoc manner. You will go in the portal, you will deploy something, you will use an ARM template to deploy something else, and all of that. Vijay talked about, in the previous session, Vijay talked about having a DR pattern where you have two Azure Stacks and you're replicating the resources across the two, and then you're moving the data in those resources, right? Now, the interesting part is we're publishing the code which is used behind that to replicate those resources. What happens is you can use that code to have a kickstarting process into your infrastructure as code approach. Meaning you will run a code, and I'll show you what it looks like. It's a set of PowerShell tools, essentially, which are reading your source subscriptions and then just copying that across the secondary stamp. So I have here a stamp where I've deployed a number of resources. They are all deployed in two resource groups. Most of them are deployed with templates, but there's a number of templates, and you can see I failed a couple of times, and eventually they went through. I didn't use them properly and so on. But at the end, I've configured my environment. This was my environment, and I have everything I need inside. Now, using the script, you will read that environment. You will create the parameters required to, where's my parameters? Here. These are all the parameters of the resources that I created in that source subscription. And then essentially you replay those deployments and end up on your target. So this is my secondary stamp. This is mass 15. And in my secondary stamp, I have the two resource groups from the beginning with the same resources, the same name, same everything. You can see all my deployments went on because there was no person behind them to actually click through them and to break them and such. So everything succeeded in the right order. When you do this, you can also have things like fixing managed disks, for example. If you've used just disks on the initial deployment, you can flip them over to managed disks on this side. Or you can improve things like IPs and so on, which you didn't use according to your naming schema and such. This script is available. Where is it available? There's documentation available on the docs.microsoft.com site, and the script itself is available on GitHub for you to consume directly when and to improve, right? The way you would use the script, though, is to kickstart you in the right direction and to have that infrastructure as code approach. Now, as you move these workloads, Azure Stack is a hyper-converged system, meaning if you need to scale them, you will need additional storage. If you need additional storage, you will need to actually plug in nodes to that system, right? So we have two partners today that are extending that storage, are helping extend that storage. One of them is using Scality and helping you replicate data across two Azure Stacks, for example. But the big announcement which was made yesterday was around NetApp supporting Azure Stack Hub as a target. So there's a NetApp published document here, which is going to guide you through how to use a NetApp appliance next to your Azure Stack in order to create that extension. And I think we got to switch. So I'm going to go quickly through these. In terms of the whole migration process, you were talking about migration, enablement, and innovation. For each of them, we have various announcements that were made in order to help accelerate that and to help you to innovate as well as to start with what you have and to innovate on top of it. Now, for this, we have an interesting story coming from a customer that's actually in production today and is able to give you insights into his experience on how he got on Azure Stack and why they're using it for.
Okay, perfect. So, hi. First, I want to say thank you, Tibi, for the opportunity to speak about my project today. My name is Julian. I have been working for a software company since 2011 in Germany. Our main product is a patient management system for dialysis in Germany. And my field of action is the medical application management, infrastructure and operations, and Azure Stack as well. Today, our patient management system is a grown monolith, and we have the need to renew our application to scalable services. For that purpose, we are using two Azure Stack hubs in two data centers for high availability purposes. When we started planning the Azure Stack hubs, we learned very fast that we need an external consultant who understands healthcare business needs in Germany and who is an expert in Azure and Azure Stack. And when I think about the decision to get an external consultant who is advising us through the project, I think this is one of the main reasons why we could successfully deploy two Azure Stacks in such a short time. So I want to say thank you to Dino, who worked with us. As Tibi mentioned before, we lift, optimized, and then shift. So our main benefit today is that we are using infrastructure as a service. We described our infrastructure in templates and in a declarative scripting language, such as desired state configuration, because in this way, it's easy to read and to understand for everybody, because we have a standardization and we don't have long custom scripts which only 1 or 2 people in our company can read. So this enables us to deploy software and applications very fast. Today we are able to deploy a new instance of our application in about like 45 minutes until the application is up and running. Before infrastructure as a service, we needed like almost at least a day because of all the processes between the different departments in our company. Infrastructure as a service also enabled us to scale up and down quickly in response of high workloads, which brings another cost optimization for us. Infrastructure as a service is also now a big part of our disaster recovery process, which is also reducing costs and increased manageability. We also achieved a faster time to market for our application in healthcare in general, and all these benefits lead to further cost optimizations and a better customer experience for us. Another big benefit in addition to the cost optimization is that we implemented a role-based access control concept, which is where we defined our custom roles, which meets our requirements and compliance policies. So considering all these changes in our environment and infrastructure, our project implementing Azure Stack for healthcare in Germany is a big success for us. So
thank you so much
for listening.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're already over time. These are the links. That's the link to the blog post, which is going to go out in a few hours, talking about all the announcements on Azure Stack Hub throughout the week. If you have questions for us, we'll be here, or you can find us in the booth. We have stickers as well if you want. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for your time, and have a good night.